Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Administering SCCM Current Branch and Microsoft Intune Integration tutorial. So in this training, I'll be discussing about configuring remote tools and client settings from your configuration manager. So if you've been working as an IT service desk engineer or as an IT administrator, sometimes definitely you want to take over remotely control a user's device to help a user solve a specific problem. And depends on which tools you are going to use actually, but you have one goal: to be able to connect to that device, control that user's device, and be able to actually install or solve that user's problem without the user actually doing it himself. So as you may know, if you are using your device, actually we have what we call the remote assistance and the remote desktop connection. But if you're going to use the configuration manager, we also have what we call remote control. But mind you, from your configuration manager, you can actually use the remote control, remote assistance, and the remote desktop to actually control a user's device. So what is the difference between these three? So for example, the remote control, which is actually different from the remote assistance and the remote desktop connection, the remote control is actually configured it's actually a config manager feature. So you cannot actually use this on a Windows device. Like if for example you are using a Windows 11, you definitely have like the remote assistance and the remote desktop, but not the remote control. And we also have the quick assistance in Windows 10 and Windows 11. So the remote assistance is actually determined by the feature that will be configured on a later feature. So if we did not configure the remote assistance, the remote control settings on our configuration manager, you will not be able to use it. So definitely someone who is an administrator or someone who has the full right to configure the config manager should be able to actually configure the remote control settings for you to be able to remotely control to a device using remote control. And the remote assistance is actually a Windows feature compared to the remote control, which is a config manager feature. So this is not part of SCCM feature, the remote assistance. The user will need to accept the request when trying to do a remote assistance. Compared to that remote control, you can actually control a device when a user is not available on his desktop. So long that device is on, you can actually remotely use the remote control to actually gain access to that device without the user acknowledging your request. But with the remote assistance, the user will definitely need to actually confirm your request before you are able to control his or her device. We also have what we call the remote desktop, which is also different from the remote control and the remote assistance. The remote desktop is actually kind of a terminal service which uses the RDP protocol. So with the remote desktop, you can also the user will also need to acknowledge your request, but you can actually terminate the user session by taking over his device, his control, even if the user is not on his desktop or laptop working on that device. So first of all, let's go and see how we can actually configure the settings to allow us to use the remote control and the remote assistance in our configuration manager. So we need to go to under administration. Here under administration, we need to go to our client settings. So you can see we have the default client settings. So right click on the default client settings and then click properties. So under the default settings, here we have the remote tools. So if you go to remote tools, you can see by default all the remote control is actually disabled. So let me just cancel this and let me go to access and computers. If I go to devices and I right click on one of those devices, let me just click. So if I right click on just one of those devices and then try to do a remote, you can see I don't have the option to do a remote control, just a remote assistant and a remote desktop client, because this is actually Windows feature. So let me go back again to administration. On our client settings, I'm going to just go right click on the default client settings and go to properties. So under properties, I'm going to go to remote tools, and in remote tools here it says enable remote control on client. But at this moment it is actually disabled, so I'm just going to click configure settings. Here we're going to actually enable remote control on client settings, and As you may see, we have three options. We have the domain, private, and public. But you don't want to actually configure the private and public, but you want to only configure domain. So which means that you should be able to actually remotely control a device when a device is on your domain environment. So I'm going to click OK for that. So right now it says users can change policy or notification settings in Software Center. You want to leave this to no. Allow remote control of an unattended computer. You want to say yes. Prompt users for remote control permission. We can actually change this to no, which means that if I try to control the user's device, I don't need the users to actually confirm my remotely connecting to that device. So by clicking yes, definitely the user will need to confirm. And if the user did not confirm you're remotely connected to that device, definitely your session will be disconnected. But there are also advantage and disadvantage of actually selecting this yes and no. By selecting yes, of course the user will be aware that someone is trying to actually access his device and grant you access to his device should in case the user is actually busy with that device. But by saying no, if there's a problem with the device, or for example there's a machine which is sitting down somewhere in a server room, you want to actually remotely control that device, probably no one will be there to actually accept your request. So definitely you will not be able to grant access that device. So I think for now I'm just going to leave it to no, because this is actually a tense environment. But if you're working for a big company, your security team will actually determine if the yes or no is the best option you will want to select. It's a prompt just for permission to transfer content from shared device. This is actually set to no. I'm going to leave this for no. And the asset level allowed, you say we have full control. You want to give view only, but for admin or IT service desk engineer, you want to give them full control to that device. And for the set viewers here, it says permitted viewers of remote control and remote assistance. So here I'm going to just select the select viewers, and under select viewers we're going to select which user want to grant access, users or group name. So here I'm going to actually look for the users group. Let me just use for the service, create a group called the service desk engineer. So here we're going to actually select the service desk engineer. So only members of the service desk engineer should be able to access that device. So should in case of something, let me just click OK, and then I'm going to say OK. Here you have one viewers, and also we have, so only members, if anyone join your service desk engineer or your help desk engineer, you can just add them to that group instead of adding individual users, and automatically they will have access to these remote control features. So here we can see we have permitted viewers, and also it says, do you want to play sound on clients? It says from beginning and end of session, so that the client should be aware that someone is trying to actually connect to his device. It says manage unsolicited remote assistance settings. So here we want to say manage solicited remote assistance. I want to actually just click this to yes. And manage solicited remote assistance, we can also say yes. And also for the remote desktop, I'm going to select this to yes, so that we should be able to use the remote desktop features from the config manager, and also allow permitted viewers to connect by using the remote desktop connection. So I'm just going to leave that to no. So level of assistance for level of access for remote assistance, we're going to give the full control. So I'm just going to click OK. So right now, if the client settings is actually deployed using policies, all the device is going to receive that policies. But at this moment, we don't have the client tools on those devices, so definitely it's not going to work at this moment. So if I go back again to my assets and compliance, and I go to other devices, if I right click one of those devices, let me just right click and let's see if it goes. Okay, here we go to start, and this moment you can see the remote control is still gray out, but mind you, because we will not deploy the policies. So after deploying our policies, the client settings policies to those devices, definitely it will allow. So we're going to see this when we try to actually manage or troubleshoot a device in one of these training video. Thank you very much for taking your time to watch this video. My name is Kelvin Johnson, and please, if this video has been of any help to you, don't forget to give me a thumb up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more IT videos. And also you can also click on the next video to watch the next tutorial on SCCM training. So if you've not watched the part 1 of this video, you should go back and watch the part 1 till this moment. I think you're going to learn a lot about administering System Center Configuration Manager current branch with Microsoft Intune integration. Thank you very much once more, and hope to see you next time. Bye.